Welcome to the Easter episode of Made in Norway. Today we're going to have a look at Cold Prey, the slasher film from 2006. We're going to have a chat with the director, Roar Uthaug, and finally end with the quiz where you can win the bow tie I'm wearing.
Hva alt er for noe?
Vi vet dere vil finne gutten deres.
Er noen som har forsvunnet?
Hallo?
Taking obvious inspiration from the slasher film from the 80s, The Shining, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake from 2003, Cold Prey sets the setting in the Norwegian mountains. Now this is a very obvious choice because the mountains in Norway have a long tradition with all Norwegians. They go skiing almost all year round and bring their oranges, their quick lunch, their black curry toddy, have picnics, and this is a family tradition that's gone through all the ages. We even have a set of mountain rules written in 1934, which are things like don't walk anywhere without telling anybody where you're going, there's no shame in turning around, and always bring a map and a compass. Something the characters in this film will learn the hard way. Even though Denmark had a wave of horror films in the 90s, starting with the success of Night Watch in 1994, Norway really didn't start making horror films about 10 years later. It started with the success of Dark Woods in 2003, and Cold Prey followed soon after. Cold Prey has great cinematography, color coding to make the atmosphere really fantastic, and characters you really believe in. It has both humor and excitement, and that is not an easy feat to do. The filmmakers wanted the film to have a distinct look to separate it from other Norwegian films, and used a color-coded palette to clean up the image and make it look more like a Hollywood film and a music video to take away some of the realism. It was for them a new way to look at the Norwegian mountains, but I personally think they went a bit over the green in the beginning. For the helicopter shots in the beginning, they used a 35mm lens, while a 16mm lens was used for the rest of the film to have a crisp look before all hell breaks loose. This was also done for budgetary reasons. All the interior night shots are shot on a Vision 210, for those of you who like to know that kind of stuff. It was directed by Roar Uthaug, who made his feature film debut with this film. He went on to have a very successful film career, directing among other things Tomb Raider. So very lucky to have him as a guest on this episode. Hello, Roar Uthaug. Thank you for joining our episode. So after making a handful of short films, you made your feature film debut with Cold Prey. You're also one of the writers. So how far into the process did you get involved?
Actually, very, very early. Two of the producers, Jan Eirik and Magne, they came to me and Martin, the other producer, and had an idea of doing a film outside of Oslo for once, because we always shoot in Oslo, up in the mountains. And their idea was to make a horror film about some snowboarders who die. And that's it. And then we took it from there, and Martin and I developed it with Thomas Moldestad, the screenwriter. So we kind of, created the whole story about snowboarders having an accident, finding shelter, and then meeting the mountain man, as we call him.
Yeah, so the project didn't go through much more changes than that, rather than you knew what direction you wanted to go?
I think I knew very early what kind of movie we were making. I remember me and Martin had a discussion, and he brought up like The Shining and movies like that as a reference. And I said to him, "No, Martin, we're not making that good of a movie." Because what I wanted to do was to make like a, I Know What You Did Last Summer or Scream type horror movie in Norway.
Yeah, were you inspired by other than horror films?
Good question. I've always been inspired by like the likes of Steven Spielberg, and I remember Poltergeist was one of my favorite movies growing up. But I think this one was mainly inspired by other horror movies I've seen and what kind of movies I hadn't seen in Norwegian at that time, and that I wanted to kind of bring that American slasher movie into the Norwegian film environment.
Did you find it hard to film in the snow?
Yeah, it's really hard, and the location we chose, the Leirvassbu fjellstue, was in the winter it's closed for the public. So we took over the whole place, and to get there in the winter, you have to park your cars by road, and then you have to go on like snowmobiles for 20 minutes to get there. So we brought all the equipment, all the cast and crew into that location by snowmobile, and we were stuck there for like a month or so. Everyone stayed in those corridors that they're running through in the movie. That's where we lived. And there was one hardline telephone to share for everybody on the team. There was no cell coverage. If you placed your mobile on a certain table in the cafeteria, you might get the message in during the day at some point, but otherwise, other than that, you were completely cut off from everything. So we were kind of living the movie as we were shooting it.
Yeah, because I remember at the time when it came out, it was a very unusual film for it to be produced in Norway. So were you met with a lot of skepticism in the industry while the film was in production?
Not really, I think. We got our distributor SF at that time. They were really behind the movie, and we also got funding from the Norwegian Film Institute. This was in the early days of their 50-50 kind of funding, where if you had 50% of the budget from private investors, the Norwegian Film Institute would give you the other 50. And I think we like maxed that out at that time. So we had, our budget was like 15 million Norwegian kroners. So we had 7.5 from SF and other private investors, and then we had got 7.5 from the Film Institute.
Yeah, well, as with most films in Norway, they have a limited budget and have a hard time competing with international films, especially in the same genre. So was there anything in the film that you wanted to include but were unable to?
I think we had to limit ourselves, especially in the end fight where we have this ice glacier crevasse. We had to limit the amount of shots there and be wise about what kind of shots we used and how much of it. But other than that, I think it was just normal Scandinavian filmmaking where everybody helps out across departments, and you work really hard, and then you find smart solutions to things that doesn't necessarily cost a lot of money.
Yeah, and this film was a lot of, I mean, this was your first feature film, and a lot of the actors didn't have much experience. So how did you find the actors? Did you headhunt them or get to know them from other places?
No, we had actually a really big auditioning process where we tried out a lot of new young talent, and these 5 were the guys who really stood out to us.
Was there anything special that you were looking for, like a character you were developing that didn't work in Norwegian film?
I'm not sure, but I think when Ingrid came in and to audition for the role of Jannike, it was really clear that she was our girl. She had such a like intensity in her acting that I just fell in love with immediately.
Yeah, and the film was met with great acclaim and was the 9th grossing film in Norway of that year. And actually, I read a recent article that is the second most seen horror film in Norway, just before It Chapter 1. So I was just wondering, did the success of the film surprise you or anyone else in the film?
I think that it surprised us that so many people went to see it in the Norwegian cinemas. I think we had used Villmark, which is a earlier Norwegian horror movie, as kind of benchmark, and there was a lot, like 100,000 more people or something like that, that came to see our movie in the cinema. So we were really thrilled about the turnout for that one. And as a filmmaker, it was exciting, sitting in Coliseum, our biggest cinema here in Norway, and seeing like the whole audience jump at the same time. It was a really nice thing to end a pretty hard process.
Yeah, and I have to say that the DVD release has a 2-disc excellent release and has a lot of behind the scenes trivia, and it covers the whole process. So I was just wondering, after 15 years, is there any trivia you would like to add for the film?
I'm not sure. I'm trying to think of something. We had a really nice, although it was hard at times, we had a really nice kind of bonding experience shooting the film at that, or everybody staying at that same location. And I remember we set up this screening room so we could watch movies at night. And the first night we were there, we of course watched The Shining, and everybody got really scared. And then the second day we were shooting Victoria Winge's part where she's running bloody around the corridors all day. So when the evening came, nobody was in the mood for a horror movie. So then we watched like Dodgeball. And I think that's maybe how it continued. There was enough horror during the day.
Yeah. And of course, the sequel came out a few years later. It was also met with great success. I felt it kind of followed the Halloween 2 structure of following it right after and in a hospital. So I was just wondering how much you were involved with the sequel.
I was like, yes, it was called like an associate producer. I was kind of a creative consultant on it, and I worked on the story and in the development of the script, and I also kind of consulted during the post process, but I wasn't that involved in that movie.
No, because you follow up with a lot of well-known international films as well. So I was wondering what you can tell us about your next project, Troll.
Well, I can't talk a lot about it yet. We are shooting this fall, and it's coming to Netflix sometimes next year. And it's an idea I've been having for long before Cold Prey. That's been developing in the back of my mind, and I'm really excited to finally get to make it.
Is it in Norwegian or English?
It's a Norwegian-speaking movie, yeah.
Oh, awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to that, and thank you very much for joining our episode.
Thank you, and happy Easter.
Thank you very much. And now it's time for this episode's quiz. I would like to know from you, what was the very first horror film to come out in Norway? It actually came out 40 years before the second horror film that came out in Norway. It rolls around the lake that makes people commit suicide. Please submit your answer to the email below.
Yeah.